Congressman Roemer.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm interested, Mr. Soliday, you straight shooting with us. You don't work at United anymore, and hopefully you can give us a very candid and honest answers as you've been doing here. You have said to our staff that you used to work pretty closely with Irish Flynn, who was before our commission a little bit earlier. And I think you've also said that you frequently talked with the FAA security, sometimes 3 or 4 times a day. I'm interested in what you conveyed back and forth. Did Mr. Flynn tell you about these specific instances? For instance, we have a host of different occasions when there were FAA individuals involved in intelligence briefings that gathered information on specific threats to U.S. carriers, such as the Bajinka plot. We have FAA intelligence individuals that attended a number of meetings throughout 98 and 99 and 2000, where they also picked up this information. And in 2001, what kinds of information did Mr. Flynn pass on to you in these 3 or 4 conversations that you had per day?
I certainly did not talk to the Associate Administrator 3 or 4 times a day. Our staff talked to the FAA Principal Security Inspector 3 or 4 times a day. There were issues of interpretation. There were issues of things just in applying the system. You have seen the manuals.
Was any of it informational, intelligence-oriented, either general with terrorist threat or specific terrorist threat information, or was this all on implementing?
This was implementation. If I were to talk to Associate Administrator Flynn, it would be about, generally, it would be about advanced technologies. He would ask me what our experience was with CTX implementation because he wanted to hear it firsthand.
So there was no intelligence exchange ever between the two of you?
I can think that's, anytime we say ever, never, that's,
rarely.
I can think of one instance
Hardly ever.
in particular that I came into Washington for a briefing, very similar to the...
Did this concern you at all, that you were not getting any kind of intelligence passed on, either in a general sense about a threat, an evolving threat that you might be reading about in the paper, but not getting more specific information from the agency?
I think things that I'm reading about in the paper, those were being briefed regularly. The issue I would think...
By who, though? That's what I'm trying to figure out. Who briefed
by the Intel group from FAA. Like I say, on one occasion, Irish Flynn didn't do the briefing, but the Associate Administrator was in the room to give emphasis to the importance. Again, if I'm hearing your question correctly, and correct me if I'm wrong, it is one thing to get a briefing in which maybe 300 or 400 potential threats are listed, and another to have a prioritized briefing that says these are the things. There's X amount of resource that can be devoted. So the discussion of threats out there is a part of everyday conversation, every day between myself and my staff, every day between us and the FAA.
Let me commend you. I think you also told our staff that post 9/11, you hired an Israeli firm to perform an outside audit of United's airport stations from the standpoint of risk. Can you give us information as to what kinds of things were recommended to you in ramping up security, and what obstacles you might have run into in order to implement those?
Yes, we used them after the Yosef threat in the Pacific. Immediately when the threat became apparent to us, I had at that time an Israeli consultant and consulting firm, had it through the time I left. We asked them to go out into the Pacific, look at our stations, look at them specifically. Those things that we corrected, I believe we have records of what they were. I'm not certain we're not into some issues that should be in private as opposed to, but that is true. Then in the 9/11 instance, post 9/11, as I shared with the staff, I I brought him in in the first flight that I could get him here, asked him to share with me additional things that we could do.
Without being specific about what those are, I agree with you. Maybe we can share that in writing or in a closed session. Would you have difficulties with the airline today implementing those or with the FAA?
I would have difficulty with the government in general. I can give you his high-level assessment. His exact words were, "You Americans are obsessed with the means. The only way you will stop them is by keeping them off the airplanes. And to do that, you must do aggressive profiling." One carrier shared their data, and you know the results of that.
In your view, you also said to our staff that today we have more consistent training of screeners, but no significant improvement in technology and no apparent improvement in performance. You stick by that? Do you modify that?
The issue was when one talks about performance, the context of that conversation, as I recall it, was in regard to one particular element. One of the issues that has been alive since 1981, a number of studies, is the human factors of screeners' interaction with the technology. Popular view was that it was solely economic. That was reinforced by a number of government auditing agencies, that if you just change the pay, then screening will get better. But quite frankly, if you look at the National Academy of Science panel study in 1996, it said specifically there was very little evidence that pay would change anything. There were significant human factors issues. The FAA applied a number of times for grants to do the kind of human factors studies that we did with pilots, being part of the crew resource management. I know I don't look like I'm old enough to have been part of the beginning, but I was. We spent millions in the government to understand why pilots err. We have just scratched the surface of understanding why screeners fail to detect. I believe Mr. Lehman, or one of the previous people who testified, talked about probability of detection. So when I shared with them that I think that it would be wrong to say that the overall security has not improved. It certainly has. But in certain areas, if you look at the rate of detection, it is not significantly better than before. Now, we've added layers on both sides to take care, just like we do in an airplane. If we know a system has a 10 to the minus 9th probability of failure, then we say that is safe to fly. But if we have a 10 to the minus 7th, I'm required, or the manufacturer is, to build redundancy to get to 10 to the minus 9th. One of the things that Senator Kerry talked about was we've done a number of things that are emotional. Instead of looking at a risk level that we are comfortable with. And if you look at security in a true risk assessment way, you start looking at the human factors. Why do people fail? It's not because they don't care. It's because there are failure modes in the technology and how the humans interface with that technology that we don't understand.
I appreciate your very helpful answers. I know we're running out of time, and I think Senator Kerry has